Om Namo Narayana. Welcome back to our final video of the Narada Parivrajaka Upanishad. Today we will read the ninth section, which is the final section. Let me just make sure. Yep, it's the final one. It's a little long, but I've just decided to just go forth and do it, and we will close this up. And yeah, what a journey. Then Narada inquired, "How is the real form of Brahman?" The god Brahma answered, expounding the real form of Brahman. Those who consider that he, the transcendent Brahman, is one and himself, the individual self, as another are beasts, though not beasts in their true nature. The wise sages have realized thus that the individual self and Brahman are identical, and they are thus released from the jaws of death. There is no other path known to reach the goal of final beatitude. Time is the root cause of worldly life, say some philosophers. Natures, say the Mimamsakas. Chance, say the atheists. The five elements, say the Jainists. Matter, say the Shaktas. The Purusha, say the Yogins. Thus the speculation on the cause of worldly life. The combination of these is not the cause on account of the existence of the self. The self, too, is incapable of being the cause on account of its being subject to happiness and misery. The knowers of Brahman, resorting to the yoga of deep meditation, perceived the power of the self-luminous Atman, well hidden by its own attributes, who alone governs all the causes including time and the individual self. They perceived that the world, resembling the wheel of a chariot, in one Maya, covered with 3 gods, possessing 16 powers, having 50 spokes with 20 nails, having 6 groups of 8, with one desire of many forms, with 3 kinds of paths, and having delusion, which is the cause of the 2, that being goodness and sin. We think of that river, the water of which flows in 5 ways, which has 5 fierce mouths due to its 5 causes, the waves of which are the 5 vital airs, whose source is the ego, which controls the 5 senses of perception, which has 5 whirlpools, whose speed of flow consists of the 5 miseries, which has 50 divisions, and which has 5 junctures. In this wheel of Brahman, which is the cause of all life, the dissolution of all, and the extensive, the Hamsa is revolved. Having considered himself as separate, and the Brahman as the controlling self, and then becoming beloved by him, the individual attains immortality. This indeed has been sung in the Upanishads as the Supreme Brahman. On him the triad, and it is the support of the phenomenal world, which is in itself. It is imperishable. Knowers of the Veda, realizing the difference between the self and the Brahman to be false, and completely devoted to him, are absorbed in the transcendent Brahman. The Lord sustains the universe unified by cause and effect. The perishable, phenomenal world, and the imperishable, the Maya, the unmanifested, nature, and the unmanifested cause, the Maya. The individual Atman is considered to be powerless due to its nature of being an experiencer of pleasure and pain. Having realized the self-effulgent being, he becomes free of all bonds. The omniscient and the ignorant are the 2 uncreated beings. The former is the Lord, and the other is the powerless. There is indeed the one uncreated Prakriti, which is intended for the things of existence, and the experiencer. The transcendent Atman is unlimited and omnipresent, and is not an agent of actions. When one realizes these 3 to be Brahman, one becomes Brahman. Prakriti is perishable. The Lord is immortal and imperishable. The one self-effulgent being rules over the perishable Prakriti and the individual Atman. By repeated deep meditation on him, and the concentration of the mind in yoga, and by realization of true reality, there shall be the disappearance of the universal illusion, Maya, at the end of one's ignorance. Having realized the self-effulgent Lord as identical with the self, one is released from all bonds. With all miseries destroyed, there will be an end to births and deaths. By deeply meditating on that he is no other than that reality, and when the difference between the body and the self has disappeared, the sage realizes the 3rd supreme state of the Parameshvara, and therein final beatitude. And thus he has fulfilled himself. This Brahman should be realized as oneself. It is everlasting and present as the individual Atman, for there is nothing other than that is worthy of realization. Having considered with illusory vision the experiencer, the objective world of experience, and the ruler as different, know that all this triad has been well declared by the knowers of the Vedanta to be Brahman alone. The means of realizing this Brahman is the Brahma Vidya, the teachings of the Upanishad. The means of realizing this Brahman is the teachings of the Upanishad and penance. It is solely dependent on the Upanishads for realization. To one who thus understands and meditates on oneself alone, saying, what thinking, what delusion is there, what sorrow to one who beholds oneness? Hence the separateness of Viraj, the past, the present, and the future disappears, and they become of the form of the indestructible Brahman. Subtler than the atom, greater than the great, the self is sustained in the heart of this every creature. One sees this transcendent Lord who is free from passions by the grace of the Creator, and thus becomes freed from sorrow. Having no hands and feet, the Lord moves fast and grasps objects. Without eyes, he sees. Without ears, he hears. He knows nothing to be known without a mind, as he is omniscient. No one knows him. Knowers of the Vedanta speak of him as the foremost transcendental Purusha. The wise yogin does not feel sorrow, having realized the Atman who is bodiless, transcendent, and all-pervading, and who is present in all bodies which are impermanent. This transcendent being, the prop of all, whose powers are beyond the reach of thought, who is to be realized by the esoteric meaning of all Upanishads, and who is greater than the indestructible great, ought to be realized. At the end of everything, the emancipator ought to be known. The all-wise, the most ancient, the most exalted of sentient beings, the Lord of all, the one adored by all gods, and devoid of beginning, middle, and end, the infinite, the indestructible, and the prop to the gods, Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma, should be realized. All this universe made up of the five elements and remaining in the five, which becomes endless in variety, by their quintuplication is pervaded by him, but it is unencompassable by the parts, thus quintuplicated. For it is the highest of the high, and greater than the great, and the eternal auspiciousness of the effulgence of its own form. Thus the seeker after liberation should realize the self as Brahman. Neither one who has not refrained from bad conduct, nor one who is not peaceful, nor one without concentrated meditation, nor one whose mind is not quiescent can realize him by mere knowledge of the Scripture. But the one gaining true knowledge, by refraining from the evils described above, realizes Brahman. The self reveals itself neither to one who considers it as inwardly wise, nor as outwardly wise, nor as gross, nor as subtle, nor as knowledge, nor as ignorance, nor as knowledge of both, nor as conceivable, nor as knowledge of both external and internal, nor as conceivable, nor as directly connected with the worldly activities. He who realizes it thus becomes liberated. He becomes liberated. Thus was said by the god Brahma. The mendicant monk is a knower of the real nature of the self. The mendicant monk journeys alone, as duality is foreign to him even in a crowd. Like a deer timid through fear, he remains without mixing with company. He does not stand in the way of others' progress, discarding everything other than his bare body, sustaining his life in the manner of a bee by collecting food from different places, and deeply meditating on his self, and without seeing any difference in all things from his own self, he becomes liberated. This mendicant monk, abstaining from being the agent of all worldly affairs, freed from the duties of preceptor, disciple, scripture, etc., and discarding all bands of the phenomenal world, is untouched by delusions. How can the mendicant monk, devoid of wealth, be happy? He is rich, as he is the wealth of Brahman, beyond both knowledge and ignorance, beyond pleasure and pain, illuminated by self-effulgence, celebrated among the people, omniscient, the giver of all great powers, the Lord of all. Thus he considers himself. That is the highest place of Lord Vishnu, where the yogins, having reached it, never return. The sun shines not there, nor does the moon. He never returns again to the worldly life. He never returns. That is the final beatitude. And thus ends this Upanishad. Whew, wow. And that brings us actually to the end of Upanishad 90, leaving us only 18 to go. I'm actually going to be taking a break right now on this channel. So in a couple days, when you come back here, you won't find an Upanishad. You'll be finding something else. I've been reading these steady since since 61st, since I started the 61st Upanishad, and you know how I like to do the channel. I like to take a break and go other places. So we're going to be visiting just a few other little things, and then we'll come back down the road and finish the last 18.